Hey Pro Life Jen, welcome to this new episode. Today I have a very special guest, Rebecca Kiessling. You may have heard her or seen her in the pro-life movement. She has been a pro-life speaker, a leader since 1995. She is the founder of Save the One. She has an incredible personal story that she is going to share with us today because she was conceived in rape. Thankfully, though, she was protected by the law. She was born a couple of years before 1973. She's also the mother of 5 children. She lost 2 other children to miscarriage.
And I lost a baby girl.
And you lost a baby girl. So Rebecca has, she has lived out, if you want to talk about the pro-life mission, she has lived it out and has experienced it firsthand. And we were together at the University of Alabama, Birmingham today, where we're filming on campus. And she was so generous to come and share her day with us and to have conversations with students on campus. And I will personally tell you that witnessing Rebecca in action, having conversations with students who almost every single one of them would use rape as a justification for why abortion should be legal, to see them change their minds after meeting Rebecca was outstanding. And I wish you all were there with us. So I'm going to get right into it. Rebecca, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me,
and
Kristan.
being on the podcast. It's going to, I think, be a really informative conversation. I don't think you've been on my show before.
Nope.
No, okay.
No.
All right. So I guess, why don't you get into share, how you got into the pro-life movement? What do you do? Because you're also a lawyer. Mm-hmm. So how did you get into this pro-life movement and this kind of activism?
So I had an opinion on abortion at a young age because my grandmother shared that my grandfather had wanted her to abort my aunt, the younger of her 2 children. And she began sharing this after my grandfather died. But it was actually 2 years after my aunt's daughter aborted my grandmother's first great-grandchild. And so my grandma had kept this secret until my grandfather was gone. And I couldn't help but think that if everybody had known this story, like maybe, my aunt would have really valued life and passed that down to her daughter and, known the value of life,
Sure.
right? And how much my grandmother fought for her. And so I had to face the issue. That was actually my atheist Jewish grandmother. Okay. So it's not like people say, oh, your religious views, you're trying, nope. It was my atheist Jewish grandmother.
Uh-huh.
And so I knew abortion was wrong. And in high school, studied this issue. I was on a panel, and I had classmates on my panel bringing in photos of aborted babies.
Wow. Okay.
I was horrified, but I just figured I just won't have one. Mm-hmm. Now, I, in college, attended Collegians for Life, which was the
predecessor to Students for Life America.
Yeah, in New Jersey. And I didn't get really active. I just wanted some support because I learned at 18 how I was conceived in rape and met my birth mother, and she told me she would have aborted me if it had been legal. And so being involved in the Students for Life group gave me the courage to ask my birth mother about that, and the support after I found out that she said it should have been my right. You don't know what it was like. And then later shared she actually went to 2 illegal abortions, and I was almost aborted. And 6 years later, she changed her mind about abortion. Now, decades later, we're both so thankful that we were spared. But I literally owe my birth to the law which protected me prior to Roe versus Wade. Exactly 4 years versus Roe v. Wade, she sought to abort me, and I was born exactly 3.5 years after Roe.
Wow. That's interesting that you say that, because so often we even hear from pro-life advocates, especially now in this kind of post-Roe era, I've heard, well, we need to step completely out of the law. Politics is dirty. There's never a truly 100% pro-life candidate, which I would agree with that statement. So therefore, we should just focus on culture. We should make abortion unthinkable. But I'm over here going, well, it should also be unavailable too. Like it has to be both things because the law saved your life.
Yeah. And I was, brought up in, my pro-life mentors in Michigan were no exceptions, no compromise. So Right to Life in Michigan just refused to give PAC endorsements to rape exception candidates. So if you wanted to get elected in Michigan, you better be pro-life, no exceptions. And so we had passed some of the best laws in the nation, and they had never repealed that law, which protected me until the Dems got in last session.
Yeah.
And they repealed it, and
that's unbelievable.
Yeah, but so I know that with the right leadership, you don't have to have exceptions. You don't have to compromise. I think it's just all about, leadership. And I think that if you want to pass really good laws, you set that standard because you look at what states, were passing like heartbeat bills. Most of them had no exceptions, and because their leadership
demanded it.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting. We sometimes bet against ourselves, or we try to compromise with ourselves before going to the other side. Which I'm like, well, why would you do that? Like, there might be compromise that gets struck, within the back rooms, and we're not there. But why would we do it preemptively before even getting to them? It's like, it's kind of crazy. We're like, oh, they'll never go for that. The members will never go for that law unless it has a rape exception in it. Therefore, we'll just add it in. I'm like, well, maybe they will add it in, but like, why would we, the pro-life movement, start the conversation? Like, that's not even a strong negotiating point. It doesn't make sense. But
and at the state level, 87%, I think it was, 87% of legislation, pro-life legislation, was introduced without exceptions. And then it was like 76 or something that was passed without exceptions. So at the state level, they're doing really well. Congress, that's like a whole other story, but it is possible, and there are people who are no exceptions.
How does that make you feel? You think about this whole year, we're going into even more abortion conversation in the nightly news because this is the only talking point the Dems want to run on. And it's like in every single conversation, every single news article about abortion, rape is like the justification for 100% of abortion laws. How does that make you feel when your story is being used, your mother's story, your personal story is being used to justify all abortions?
Yeah. And it's like what happened in Arizona. They're in the news are saying, oh, it was too extreme.
Because it banned all abortions.
Yeah, and Donald Trump was saying, oh, it's too extreme. And it's like, what's extreme is killing a living human being as punishment for what someone else did. That's extreme. The U.S. Supreme Court said, and I brought this up so many times today, and we were talking to students, and the lights go on.
Oh, yeah.
Coker v. Georgia, they said rapists don't deserve the death penalty. Kennedy v. Louisiana, that even for child molesters, it's cruel and unusual punishment. And so how does an innocent child deserve to die? And in a civilized society, we do not punish innocent people for someone else's crime. That's what's extreme. And so we have to turn the tables on. Every time they say extreme, you need to remind them of what is actually extreme.
When you have that conversation, I will watch you have that conversation today, and every single student you spoke to, they got very silent when you brought up that point. What the normal conversations that you're having, are they just going instantly then back to a bodily autonomy argument when you say that, or how does the conversation go after you bring that up? When they agree with you that the Supreme Court and largely our majority of our society would say the death penalty is too extreme for a rapist.
Yeah, there was actually one guy who said he believes in the death penalty for rapists, but it's still, Supreme Court says they don't. And then I remind people too that only 1% of rapists are ever convicted as charged. So it's they're roaming free. It's not even that they're going to prison. They're roaming free.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to have the child killed for his crime. You know, it's like, who really is the horrible reminder? You know?
Yeah.
Isn't he?
It's the rapist.
Yeah, and he's going scot-free.
Yeah, I was interviewing somebody recently on a show who was assaulted, became pregnant, Angela Hoarders, and, you know, her rapist is out and about. It's never been charged. In fact, the police in Maryland told her, if you press charges, we have to inform you. If you're pregnant, he will have the ability to sue for access to your child.
Well, Maryland did pass a law. They passed their Rape Survivor Child Custody Act,
recently,
which I had a lot to do with this law nationally, and have advocated for not only all over the U.S., but all over the world. And I litigate these cases pro bono, gladly. So, you know, when people, you see this a lot, because some of my cases are high profile, and so they'll say, oh, rapists can get custody. Did you see that case of that 12-year-old in Michigan? It's like, okay, that was my case, and the law that we got passed actually ended up protecting her. It worked. So the answer is not kill the baby. The answer is protect her.
Yeah, maybe like you might have to pass a law.
Yeah, so what are you doing? What are you doing to protect these girls who just want to use their story?
Yeah. What was the conversation? I saw you today. There's a couple different things I want to get to in this interview. We have such a little time, only an hour. But one of the conversations we had with the gentleman, we were talking, and then all of a sudden he was like, you're right, I'm wrong. And he was interesting because he wasn't arguing that abortion wasn't wrong. He was saying, yeah, it's wrong. He was arguing from like a libertarian view, though, that, you know, the government should only have certain roles. And I was trying to get, I mean, he said the government should have a role in ending slavery. So I was like,
yeah.
But what was it about your story that really got him to kind of decide, no, maybe the government should say no abortions. Abortions are wrong.
Well, first of all, what he says is really common. We see this with studies. Like, we have a 5-state study, the only one ever done about rape. And we could show that we could dramatically change people's opinion on this issue. But you have, you know, depending on the state, 95% of people saying they think abortion's wrong. They think it's immoral. You have girls going to abortion clinics, having abortions, believing it's wrong, and they do it anyway. And then you survey people, do you consider yourself pro-life? And the numbers go down, depending on the state. And then, but if you ask the question, should it be illegal? It plummets.
Yeah.
And
that is all over today, right?
Yeah, and that's cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
Where there's just this disconnect. And that comes from people keeping this discussion in the philosophical realm. And that's what he said, that for him it had been a theoretical discussion. That's what he shared with us after his mind was changed. He's like, yeah, I had just theorized this. And it's much different when you have a story. And so what I asked him was, you know, I shared my story and I asked him, did I deserve the protection I received? And he was like, thinking, and then he's like, I was wrong. He's like, yes, you did. He's like, I was wrong. And
it was a very quick minds change, and the view of minds changed on campuses.
Yeah, but just asking him that question, he couldn't look at me and say, no, you didn't deserve that protection. He couldn't do that. I mean, he's a decent human being, you could tell.
Yeah.
You know, and that's it. You cannot just keep this as a theoretical discussion. You have to put a face to the issue. But you also can't just tell a story and leave it at that, because they'll summarily dismiss you and say, well, good for you. You know, I'm sure when you tell the story of your child having CF, they'll just, well, good for you.
Yeah, well, you chose life for you, good for you.
Yeah, but is it about your choice, or is it about your son's humanity?
That's right.
You know, what if your values were different? Does that change whether your son deserves to be alive now? No, of course not. So you have to focus on the humanity of that child, not just make it about choice. And you have to bottom line that your son deserves to be protected, not just because you protected him. What if your values were different? He still deserved to have been protected.
No, absolutely. I think that's, you changed his mind. Like his heart was like instantly changed. And I thought that was so powerful, just asking him and showing, putting a face to this exception that we often hear. I mean, what is the one thing you wish, I'll probably get you in trouble with asking this question, but what is the one thing you wish the pro-life movement would do a better job of when it came?
Okay, defending the child conceived in rape. So for decades, the number one response to what about in cases of rape, and perhaps you've heard this, is that it's only 1%, right?
That's why your organization is Save the One.
That was, yes, and that was the number one response for decades.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I always tell people, don't diminish, just defend.
Okay.
Because it makes it sound like you don't care about the plight of pregnant rape victims when we want people to care about their plight. And my friend who's Jim Sable, he's the treasurer of Save the One. He was also conceived in rape. And he says, well, what percentage do you have to be before you matter? Like Muslims are 1% of the population. Asians are 1% of the population. Like, do they not matter? Because, I mean, the 14th Amendment is there to protect the minority groups,
right.
You know, the least of these. Like that one guy you asked him, you want your value to be based upon your popularity?
Yeah.
Whether you deserve to be alive? Like,
yeah, because he said something about putting it up for a vote, and I was like, ooh, that doesn't sound like a good idea.
That's not what the 14th Amendment's there for.
That's right.
It's that no state shall deprive a person of their right to life, liberty, or property without due process of law, and no state shall deny a person equal protection of the laws. And if you believe that's a person, you believe in the right to life, that's where it comes from, you cannot say that it should be left to the states.
That's right.
And you cannot allow for exceptions.
Yep.
Because that violates equal protection.
How do you feel like when you hear Donald Trump say things like, it should be left to the states, and obviously I believe in the exceptions, and like I don't know anyone in the pro-life movement who says this is a state issue. We are all unanimous that this is a federal issue. I can work with somebody who says it's a state issue because we have a defunded Planned Parenthood, debarred Planned Parenthood, and there's a whole list of things that Joe Biden has done to make abortion federal that would keep the Trump administration 2.0 really busy for 4 years. So I can work with that while disagreeing with it. But then he just keeps like, I don't know. It's so frustrating because he says it's a state issue. Okay, fine. I can give you very specific things to do why I disagree with you on that. And then he condemns the Arizona thing, even though it was a state issue. So then he doesn't really think it's a state issue because at the end of the day, he still has these like exceptions.
And interestingly, all the Arizona Supreme Court did was say that this is a legislative issue.
Yeah, that's right.
We're going to leave it to the legislature. The legislature could have repealed this law.
And they didn't.
And they didn't. In Michigan, our Supreme Court, before it ever got, voted on by the people or by the legislature, did it.
Yeah.
Our Supreme Court in Michigan found that there was this right of reproductive freedom under the Michigan Constitution. And, they basically were like Roe did.
Hidden in invisible ink somewhere there.
Yeah, but
I guess if you were talking to Donald Trump, if I was Donald Trump,
sure,
funny of you, what would you say to me?
Okay, well, interestingly, Donald, I remember years ago when you first came out as pro-life, and I remember the story that you told before you ever ran for politics. You said that you were against abortion, that you were pro-life because your friend had been coercing his girlfriend to abort. And he wanted so badly for her to abort that baby. And he shared with you that that child is the apple of his eye now. And you said that that story changed your heart and that it put a face to the issue for you. This is my story too. And I would try, to remind him of how he first became pro-life.
Yeah.
And these stories matter. People matter. I explained to this young man today how my first day of law school, legal research and writing class, we learned something called IRAC, Issue, Rule, Application, Conclusion, the acronym. That you have to be able to, for writing a legal brief or arguing a case, you have to state the issue, then state the rule or the law or the principle, and then you apply it to the real people in your case at hand, and then you make a conclusion. And you could be the best legal scholar there is, but if you don't know how to apply the law to real people, you lose. And likewise, if you merely tell a story and you fail to apply it to the law, you lose. And I think that that holds true in the pro-life movement, like with this issue. You can't just state the facts and put forth arguments, and you can't just tell a story. You have to bring it all together.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it real for people. And there's studies that show, in fact, that that is what sways people's opinions. You know, you have to tell these stories. And that's why, like, politicians always have, or the presidents always have someone up in the gallery during the State of the Union address, right?
Yep, that's the story behind their policy. I
And
know.
the face.
It's so frustrating to hear. I've even had pro-life friends in Washington, D.C. Well, some of them probably don't call themselves my friend anymore in the past few months. But, you know, like, we have to give in on this. Issue 1 was clear. Ohio's issue 1 was clear. Michigan was clear. We're losing on rape. We have to give in on it. And I just find that, so you're asking us to undermine the entire principle of our pro-life movement, that every human being has value and dignity because we lost in
So
Ohio.
I was involved in speaking to the powers that be. They were going to decide the campaign, the pro-life campaign in Michigan and in Ohio. And in both cases, they were told, don't mention rape.
Yep.
Don't mention rape. Don't defend it.
As if it's just going to go away.
Yeah, like you're going to stick your head in the sand and go, la, 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 I can't hear you. I mean, years ago that happened in South Dakota when there was this effort to repeal the abortion ban that had no exceptions. And the opposition's yard signs were the word rape. It was black and yellow yard signs with a coat hanger over it. That was it. That was their whole message. And they were going to run an ad with me and 2 other people who were conceived in rape. There was actually this guy who founded Angel Bus. He was the founder of Prairie Coach Lines, and he was conceived in rape, and he was going to come out publicly. And then they had the copy, and we were just, he and I were going to do it. We were going to say that life begins at conception. Like, 99% of people like already believe that, like they knew that, in South Dakota. You're wasting money if that's going to be your message. And they said that they were going to just scrap the whole thing because they want to stick with a positive, upbeat message, and you can't. When you fight back, you win. And years ago, Right to Life in Michigan, on the Medicaid ban, the ban on Medicaid funding of abortion. Years ago, they were winning going up to November election. And then 2 months out, Planned Parenthood began running ads on the issue of rape. And Right to Life did another poll, and it showed that they were going to lose on that issue. So what did they do? They borrowed money that they didn't have, and they ran an ad in the last week or so, and they won because they fought back, and they ran with the story, and they hit it head on. There were crickets.
This is exactly what, by the way, what we tell pro-life politicians. Don't put your head in the sand on abortion because you will lose.
Yeah.
But then pro-life political strategists are doing the same thing when it comes to children conceived in rape.
So you had Todd Aiken.
Yeah.
He quoted a pro-life leader when he said, "Oh, the body is a way of shutting itself down." That should have never been said. That was an example of why you don't minimize, right? Don't diminish, just defend. And he was a good guy, but unfortunately he repeated that misinformation. And so a lot of people thought, oh, you can't defend it, don't say anything. And that's when we had 3 organizations do a 5-state study, because when you and I spoke in Congress together, and after the loss of, what's his name from Utah? He was like the governor of Massachusetts.
Oh, Romney.
Romney, yeah. They blamed, Aiken and Murdoch for his loss. And so they said it's got to be research-based. And so we did a 5-state study, and it was interactive online. People were asked questions, and they were surveyed at the beginning, halfway, and at the end. And we could show that we could dramatically sway people's opinion on this issue. And most effective is putting a face to the issue, telling a story, challenging on this, right? That works. Right. And I changed the heart of Governor Rick Perry during his presidential campaign and Newt Gingrich. And they did not get beat up like Aiken and Murdoch, because they didn't say anything awkward. And because there was a woman associated with this story, like a real person, like, oh my gosh, like the media gave them a pass. So it shows that a politician can come out and stand up on this issue, especially if you have a real story. And we want people to use our stories. With Save the One, we have a network of over 1,200 now. And
you can request people to come to like speak at your events or your church or campus, right?
Or if there's a politician who needs our help, he's getting attacked, we'll be there. We'll do a press conference talking about what a hero he is.
How do people find out? Go to that website and get that list.
So it's savetheone.com, and that's the number 1, not the word 1. And I do, message training for legislators all over the country. Have groups of 50 legislators at a state capitol, and have been able to get pro-life legislation passed with no exceptions right after doing that legislator training. And there have been politicians who have said to me, I always knew morally what the right position was, but I always felt like it was politically indefensible. But after hearing you present on this messaging, I could see myself saying that, and I could see how that would be effective.
Taking a note right now. I need to have you at my state legislator training this summer, Students Life Action. Note to self.
So one of the most important things is to say that I don't believe in punishing innocent people for someone else's crime. And there's a lot of different ways of saying that. I don't believe that Ryan Baumberger deserved to die for the crime of his biological father. And I don't like using the term father. I'd rather say, the man who raped my mother, because he doesn't deserve that father status, right?
I was wondering, because I was like using biological, but then it was...
Yeah, the man who raped her, And, I believe in punishing rapists, not babies. That's easy. Maybe my opponent believes in punishing babies, but I, for one...
Well, punish rapists.
And
that's a great segue into the challenges we have in our current existing laws of protecting women from rapists and holding rapists accountable, which you've already mentioned.
Made huge progress. Huge progress. When I started out, there was only one state that provided for terminating parental rights of rapists using the clear and convincing evidence standard. And again, I'm an attorney, so I'll
get all legalese on this.
Yeah. But the U.S. Supreme Court said that meets constitutional muster because this is not a criminal matter where normally it's beyond a reasonable doubt, right? This is a civil matter, terminating parental rights. And the highest standard in civil cases is clear and convincing evidence. And so you don't have to have a conviction for child abuse or for child molestation in order to terminate parental rights on those bases. So why should you have a higher standard for rape victims who become pregnant? And so we have 49 states, I'm not sure if Minnesota has passed anything yet, who have passed laws for terminating parental rights of rapists, and 50% of them use the clear and convincing evidence standard. So we still have a ways to go. They get money for rape victim programs if they use the clear and convincing evidence standard per the Federal Rape Survivor Child Custody Act. That gives a financial incentive to states because it's a states' rights issue, right? But they have money, purse strings that you get.
That actually is a state rights issue, maybe you could say.
Yeah, that one is, yeah. But the federal government passed a law giving an incentive to states so they get more money for rape victim programs if they pass the law. Smart. And I represent these women for free. I've litigated so many cases in Michigan, and I help find attorneys all over the country. Alliance Defending Freedom, who I know you all have partnered with a lot. I'm an allied ADF attorney. They agreed to allow me to use the network and in order to identify attorneys to handle these cases, and they'll count it towards their pro bono hours.
Wow.
So
That's awesome.
yeah. Do you know, interestingly, the only vote against this law in Michigan was a Democrat, Marcia Covey-Wright, who was a former Planned Parenthood manager. Isn't that crazy?
Wow. What was her justification?
I don't know, but she's
Saying that
proved
rapists should have access to children?
she proved herself to be pro-abortion.
Yeah, she totally did. I'd say the mission was accomplished on that one.
Yeah, that's when they
So, I mean,
show their
you've
colors.
been involved. I mean, you're not only, I mean, we're not going to have time to get into it today, but I mean, you've been involved in embryo adoption cases,
Frozen embryo
cases, right?
Between like mother and father, yeah.
Okay. And you've been involved in this type of advocacy of talking about protecting women who've been sexually assaulted and survived sexual assault, terminating the parental rights of the men who rape women and impregnate them. But I before we end the podcast, I wanted to get into something that now you see you on TV more for, in the news media, is your work. The last time I know that you testified at Capitol Hill was really for fentanyl.
Yeah.
And for our government to do something on fentanyl. Do you want to talk about why your pro-life mission it continues on, it's taken on this new form, and how this is all sadly tying together.
It is. And you know, I told you I was raised by atheist Jews, but you know, I became a Christian later, and my pro-life views, you know, have nothing to do with my faith, really. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm not pro-life because some church tells me to be, right? I'm pro-life because I know that it kills a living human being. Baby. But I will tell you that I see the field for how it is. And the thief came to steal, kill, and destroy, right? And how do you go about it? You know, if you think the world's overpopulated, for example, because I think that, you know, he uses these politicians.
Bill Maher just said it, right?
No, 8 billion people.
I won't miss you.
I won't miss you. Yeah, a lot of people won't miss him. So what then? You know, but you know, the enemy will convince these people the world's overpopulated. And so for anybody who's not sure about it, I encourage them, watch the movie Demographic Bomb, Demographic Winter. You'll see the truth on that issue. But I know, how do they go about thinning the herd, right? If the world's overpopulated, how do they go about it? Well, they don't want to just be dropping bombs everywhere. You know, they have to be clandestine, right?
Abortion, sterilization of our children, right? Through transgender
the most marginalized groups. Yeah. You know, when people aren't really paying attention. So the preborn, those who are disabled, whether in the womb or later, elderly, you know, infirm, and those with gender dysphoria. It's no coincidence that Planned Parenthood is the #1 provider of
wrong sex hormone therapy.
Yeah, they're happy to sterilize.
The Mayo Clinic just said, can sterilize children after they've been denying it for years.
Yep. And they'll happily sterilize you because it's not care no matter what. It's thin the herd no matter what, right? These are population control people.
I mean, that's what Planned Parenthood was founded to do.
Yeah, Margaret Sanger. Yeah. She was a population control person. And then those with substance use disorder. And you wonder, like, why don't they care? Why aren't they doing anything?
Yeah, like, why aren't they doing anything about the fentanyl crisis? Everyone has pretty much, I know of, maybe just where I grew up, has lost somebody to drug overdose, right? I can name several of my best friends.
Although this isn't drug overdose. It's poisoning.
But it's poisoning. Fentanyl is even, yeah. But no one does anything. Everyone kind of talks about it, but no one does anything.
Yeah, but I think that you could take the words of Bill Maher. You know, the world's overpopulated. It's 8 billion people. I'm sorry, you won't be missed. And I think you could take those and put them in the mouths of all these politicians who won't do anything about the border. And that's really what's in their heart. It's just they're not supposed to take the mask off, right?
Yeah.
And show you what they really think. Because even like the people on his show, you heard them say, wow, that's harsh. Like,
But then they didn't disagree.
Right.
But then they didn't disagree. Wow, that's harsh.
Oops.
But I'm not going to disagree.
Oops. Not supposed to say that. Don't take the mask off, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, that's the master plan. It really is. That all these people who think that human beings are the worst thing that ever happened to the planet, but they're not exactly lining up to lead everyone else into mass suicide because they're like elitists.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, who think the planet couldn't live without them. And so, yeah, you see that they just do not care. And they're allowing fentanyl to flow over the border. And I mean, I testified before the border committee. It was the first hearing on the issue last year. And I said, you know, we had a weather balloon from China going across the country. Nobody died, but everybody's freaking out. Yet we have now estimated 120,000 young people dying every year. It's the number one cause of death, ages 18 to 40.
120,000.
Yeah, the last formal records were like 111,000.
Oh my gosh.
The year my sons died in 2020, it was over 100,000. And I said,
your sons both died
together. Yeah,
fentanyl poisoning.
Yeah, along with the 17-year-old girl, they got fake Percocets. You know, you've seen the campaign.
They thought they were taking a Percocet.
Yeah, and you've seen that slogan, one pill
kills.
Yeah, oh yeah, one pill can kill. And interestingly enough, because it went viral, my testimony, and President Biden spoke to House Democrats that night, and he said, "Oh, you see that poor mom, you know, who lost her two sons," and he laughs. Well, it turns out the fentanyl they got came during the last administration, and he just laughed because he just doesn't care, and the rest of us don't have Secret Service agents to help keep our sons alive, you know? But he really doesn't care. I mean, it shows his heart, and it's like, sorry, you won't be missed, right? And that's their attitude.
120,000 children.
Yeah.
Your two boys died of one pill.
Yeah, and it was really like casualties of war, a war that's
and
being
no
waged.
one's talking about. I mean, like people are talking about, but they're not really talking about it.
Right.
I mean, like abortion is on the nightly news every single night, which I would advocate is a good thing, right? It's not a good thing the way they're talking about, but they're using it for the Biden administration to gin up votes.
Yeah.
But how is that not on the nightly news every night?
Yeah, and I said, look, if we had Chinese troops amassed at our southern border with weapons of mass destruction aimed at our cities, you damn well know you would do something about it. But it's like everybody, the powers that be know that this is a war being waged by China and by the cartels. I go to these DEA.
China's involved with the fentanyl.
Oh, yes. They used to send it straight over. Now they send the precursors over. It's big business in China. There's been exposés, like documentaries done on how they have 401ks associated. I mean, it's like formal big business, okay? And
so destroying our country, TikTok and fentanyl.
Yes.
And all of their hacking.
And a lot of the trafficking is being done through TikTok. It's being sold through TikTok and Snapchat. And so they train the cartels. They work with the cartels and train them how to produce fentanyl from the precursors. I attend these DEA family summits, and they brief us. And the cartel's stated goals are global domination. They own much of the industry in Mexico now. You know, and how do you take over a country? Well, you kill off the young people, right?
Yeah.
This is military age, ages 18 to 45, number one cause of death. Military age, right? And they're just killing us off, and we're letting them year after year after year.
And the ones that aren't being killed are now the majority of them say that they're wrong sex and have all these anxiety and depression. I mean, like if you think about the other side, like you think about, I was looking at these studies at like Brown University, it was like more than half of all kids who came into Brown last year said they were LGBTQ.
Yeah.
I mean, like, so they're either killing them with fentanyl or getting them hooked on some awful other drug.
Or sterilizing them.
It's
all
or
population
like making them
control.
anxious and depressed.
Mm-hmm. But how do people not see all of this being connected to population control? How do people not see what's happening?
Yeah, because they don't care. It's so clear. Like, they don't care. I mean, Bill Maher, like, he laid it out. He doesn't care that babies are dying.
It's like the movie The Matrix. Like, which pill are you going to swallow? Do you want to see what's really happening in this world? What's really happening in our country? And who's behind it? Like, it is all about population control.
It absolutely is.
And
wow.
So I'm trying to raise awareness, and I mean, it's been hell. I mean, like Jesus said that he described hell as being a place where there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And I literally cracked a tooth like 2 months out after losing my son. It's been hell on earth. But the best thing I can do now is to, I'd much rather talk about how they lived and how they died. Yeah. But I can honor them by trying to save lives and trying to sound this alarm and show people what's up, what's happening. I mean, I'm in support groups with over 30,000 parents. But you think about how many parents are losing kids every year. Yeah. Over 200,000 to almost 250,000 parents a year. And that's just parents. And then what about all the other loved ones? Like you said, we all know someone. Yeah. And we have to demand that something be done. I'm glad to see that it has been the number one issue, but I know they quickly want to hijack it and make abortion the number one issue now. But it's all related. It's all the same spirit of death.
It absolutely is. Well, thank you for sharing your story and being so courageous in sharing your story and being such a fighter on that whole kind of spectrum of life of, advocating for the vulnerable human in the embryonic stage, the vulnerable human in the fetal stage, the young adolescent. It's incredible to hear all the work that you're doing legally and then your advocacy. I want to thank you for that. And I thought it was so interesting before we started recording. You said one of the gentlemen you changed your minds of today shared the name with your son.
Yeah, Caleb. That. Yeah.
Oh, that's a.
And I told you, I follow you, of course. We've been Facebook friends for years, but my daughters, who are ages 16 to 20 now, my 3 daughters follow you, and just love you. You're influential. You're making a difference in their lives because it's not just mom said it, right?
It's third-party validation.
So I really appreciate that you're feeding into them, because social media does play a big influence. And gosh, if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't have gotten my kids' phones. Honestly, big mistake. Because they just got exposed to so much. Anyhow, I'm looking forward to collaborating with you. I told you
that's right. We have work to do.
And we have a lot of speakers, so if people want somebody to speak on this topic on campuses, we have lots of trained...
SaveTheOne.org, right?
Yeah, SaveTheOne.com. We have lots of trained speakers, people who want to make a difference, and they're available all over the country, so you don't necessarily have to fly someone in.
I want to thank you for that, and I want to just make a direct pitch to you all. So if you're leading a pro-life group on your campus, your community, your parish, an Abortion-Free Cities campaign, you really need to consider bringing Rebecca or somebody on her team, Save the One, with you. I saw it firsthand today, the difference it made to have somebody who was conceived and raped, a human being with a story, a testimony, who's done incredible things right there in the flesh, to move that conversation, as Rebecca said, from being this philosophical position to them having to meet somebody that they're talking about, who, when they're arguing philosophically, they're arguing should be dead. So go to SaveTheOne.com.
I'll tell you another interesting story that a student told me, though, when I spoke at UC Berkeley many years ago, they had the old Feminists for Life poster
Yep.
of me. Did I deserve the death penalty? And they were tabling.
I put that up on my college campus too.
So somebody was standing there staring at that poster, and the student asked, "So what do you think?" And the guy said, "I think you just changed my mind." And that was just a poster.
Just a poster.
Okay, so it works. Like, don't be afraid to try. You know.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Don't be afraid to try. We'll end the podcast there. Thank you all for joining us this week for this very special episode of the Kristan Hawkins Show. I hope you got as much out of it as I did in learning about Rebecca, her pro-life ministry and advocacy, all that she's doing at Save the One. And I genuinely hope you will consider hosting her or someone from her ministry on your campus or at your church to speak about this issue and really stand up to our own friends in the pro-life movement, especially now as we head into November, where you're going to hear a lot of conversations about why we should just embrace exceptions or get along with it in order to win the election, about why we can never weaken our position in the pro-life movement, that all human beings, no matter the circumstance of conception, are valuable and deserve, at the minimum, the right to be born. Make sure you check out YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Like and share this episode and asking questions. And who knows, I might be reading your question next week and answering it to the best of my ability. Bye.